Have you ever tried to defend yourself only to realize that the more you speak, the worse it gets? Have you noticed how the ones who lie and manipulate often walk away untouched while you're left explaining yourself into exhaustion? What if silence, not words, was your strongest weapon, and karma, not confrontation, was your truest ally? The more you fight to be understood, the more your words get twisted. It's as if every attempt to seek truth, justice, or dignity only paints you as desperate, while the ones causing the pain slip away without consequence. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop explaining, stop chasing, stop reacting, something shifts. Karma begins to move quietly in your favor. Imagine a snake biting its own tail. The more it thrashes, the deeper it sinks into its own flesh. But when it goes still, nature steps in and healing can begin. Or picture a mountain echo. Whatever sound you send out eventually circles back to you. That's karma. The lies they spread, the harm they cause, it all boomerangs back in time while they are busy stirring conflict, manipulating, and deceiving. You're faced with a simple but powerful choice. Will you engage, or will you step back and let their actions collapse under their own weight? Because when you choose silence, not out of weakness but wisdom, the energy they've thrown out starts to return. Their own negativity begins to work against them. And slowly, inevitably, karma begins to write the ending they thought they had control over. So the question is, when do you stop fighting and let karma do what words never could? Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll go even deeper into the quiet strength that changes everything. We just saw how silence can be more powerful than any explanation, how stepping back can let karma and truth do their quiet work. But now, let's take that wisdom one step further. 1. When someone lies about you. Few things are more infuriating than being lied about. Someone spreads a rumor, twists your words, and suddenly you're caught in a storm of whispers. Your first instinct? To fight back, to defend yourself, to set the record straight and make sure everyone knows the truth. But here's the paradox. The more you try to explain, the more power you give to the lie. Each reaction, each explanation only fuels the drama. People who didn't doubt you before may now begin to wonder, why is he so defensive? Is there something he's hiding? The lie starts to feel real, not because it is, but because of how loudly you're trying to deny it. And the painful truth, some people don't care about what's true. They care about the chaos. The person lying about you isn't after facts. They're after control. They want to shake you. They want you off balance. They want your anger and frustration to confirm their false narrative. And the moment you engage, you're playing by their rules. This is exactly where Stoic wisdom becomes your anchor. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This is the code you must live by. Others may lie, others may manipulate, but their actions do not define you. Your response does. So what should you do instead? Don't waste your breath chasing down every rumor. Let time do what arguments cannot. Because here's something people forget. Lies have an expiration date. But truth is eternal. Let me tell you a real story. There was a man, let's call him James. At work, someone falsely accused him of something serious. The rumors spread fast. People whispered behind his back. A few colleagues began to avoid him. Naturally, his first urge was to go from person to person, explain his side, and beg for understanding. But he didn't. He chose silence. He kept doing his job with calm focus. He remained professional. He let his actions speak. Weeks passed. Eventually, the truth came out. The person who had accused him had a history of manipulation, and their lies unraveled. James? He didn't just clear his name, he gained even more respect for the dignity he held during the chaos. So how do you deal with this kind of attack? First, trust in the long game. Lies spread fast, but they burn out. Truth takes time, but it stands forever. Second, stay rooted in your integrity. If you know who you are, then the opinions of those who believe lies simply don't matter. And finally, don't try to control the narrative. Let the truth do that for you. Over-explaining only fuels doubt. But when you remain calm and consistent, the truth eventually stands on its own. Your silence becomes a quiet confidence, a steady presence that doesn't need to argue to be believed. We just explored how lies often unravel on their own, and how silence, far from being weakness, can be your greatest form of control. Now let's talk about something even more personal. Betrayal. 2. When someone betrays your trust. Few experiences cut as deep. Whether it's a friend who turns against you, a partner who breaks a promise, or someone you once believed in who lets you down, betrayal carries a sting unlike any other. It's not just about what they did, it's about who you thought they were. Your first instinct? Confront them, demand answers, get an apology. You want them to feel the weight of what they've done, to understand the depth of your pain. But here's the harsh truth. Words won't change a betrayer's heart. If someone was able to betray you once, chances are they've already justified it in their mind. Maybe they've told themselves it was necessary, or that you somehow deserved it, that it wasn't really betrayal at all. And the more you try to explain, the more twisted it gets. Try to reason with them. They'll manipulate your words. Try to make them feel guilty. They'll cast you as the villain. That's why silence, calm, controlled silence, becomes your loudest and most dignified answer. This is exactly where Stoic wisdom becomes essential. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Betrayal is one of those trials. It hurts deeply, but it also sharpens you. It forces you to examine your boundaries. It teaches you self-respect. It helps you see clearly who truly belongs in your life and who never did. The pain you feel is not meaningless. It's not just suffering, it's a lesson. A lesson in detachment, in clarity, in letting go of those who never valued you the way you valued them. Let me share a story. There was a woman, let's call her Sarah. For over 10 years, she had a best friend. They shared everything: hopes, fears, celebrations, heartbreaks. But one day, Sarah discovered something devastating. That this friend had been talking behind her back, leaking private conversations, and even quietly sabotaging her chances at opportunities. Her first reaction? Rage. She wanted to confront her, to show her the damage, to make her see. But instead, she made a different choice. She said nothing. No arguments, no revenge, no dramatic confrontation. She simply walked away, quietly, completely, without a second chance. And you know what happened? That silence echoed. The friend had expected a fight. She was prepared for drama. but what she got was indifference. That silence? It spoke more than any confrontation ever could. So how do you respond to betrayal? First, accept that some people will never be the person you believed they were. The pain doesn't come from who they are. It comes from what you expected. Let that expectation go. Second, don't waste your energy trying to explain their betrayal back to them. Deep down, they already know what they did, even if they'll never admit it. And finally, don't seek closure from someone who broke your trust. Give that closure to yourself. You don't need their apology to heal. Walking away with your integrity intact is the closure. Let their betrayal be the end of the story, not the beginning of a cycle. Sucker 3. When someone insults you. Insults come in many forms: a sharp remark, a sarcastic jab, a passive-aggressive comment, or an outright verbal attack. Regardless of how they're delivered, they're designed with a single purpose in mind: to provoke you, and often they succeed. Someone throws a few cutting words, and before you know it, you're defending yourself, raising your voice, or stewing in anger long after the moment has passed. But here's the truth most people miss. The moment you react, you hand them power. You confirm their ability to reach into your emotions and twist them. When someone insults you, they're fishing. They want to see if they can hook your attention, stir your emotions, get under your skin. But when you refuse to take the bait, when you remain calm, grounded, and indifferent, you strip away their control. And in that silence, you win. Nothing frustrates an insulter more than being ignored. That's when their words fall flat. Might out like arrows hitting stone. That's where Stoic wisdom becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And he was right. The moment you stoop to their level, whether it's sarcasm, anger, or defensiveness, you've already lost. Because now you're playing their game on their terms. But when you respond with silence, self-mastery, and quiet confidence, you flip the script. You show them, and everyone watching, that you are untouchable. Let me share a quick story. There was a man I know, let's call him David. At a company event, he had just been promoted. One of his co-workers, clearly jealous, made a loud comment in front of the team. "Wow, I guess they're just handing out promotions to anyone these days." The room froze. Everyone turned to David, waiting for his response. But David didn't take the bait. He simply smiled, looked the man in the eye, and said nothing. No retort, no defensiveness, just complete, composed silence. And that silence, it said everything. The co-worker shifted uncomfortably. He had expected fireworks, a verbal sparring match. Instead, he got nothing, and looked foolish for trying. David kept his dignity, and more importantly, he kept his power. So how should you handle insults? First, realize that insults reveal far more about the person delivering them than the one receiving them. People who insult others are often wrestling with their own insecurities. Second, understand that your silence isn't weakness, it's strength. Choosing not to react shows their words hold no weight in your world. And finally, walk with calm confidence. Let your presence, not your words, speak for you. Because in the end, you can't control what people say. But you can always control what you give power to. And sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. In the last part, we saw how your silence in the face of insults can be a form of quiet power, proof that your self-worth isn't up for debate. But what happens when someone doesn't just insult you. They flip the script and paint themselves as the victim. For when they play the victim, this might be one of the most manipulative and frustrating behaviors you'll ever deal with. You know the type. They twist the truth, conveniently leave out their own actions, and spin the story until they look like the one who's been wronged. It doesn't matter what really happened. To them, facts are just tools to be edited. Their priority isn't fairness, it's not truth, it's image. And their goal? To gain sympathy, shift blame, and cast you as the problem. The more you try to defend yourself, the worse it gets. Every word you say becomes more evidence against you. You start to look defensive, harsh, unreasonable. And they sit back, quietly collecting sympathy points. Here's a truth worth remembering. Some people don't want resolution. They want attention. They aren't looking to make things right. They're looking to control the narrative. And if you engage, if you argue, explain, or try to prove your side, you fall right into their trap. That's when Stoic wisdom steps in. Epictetus once said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." And in situations like this, that wisdom is essential, because when someone is playing the victim, they don't want solutions. They want an audience. They're not interested in growth. They're interested in applause. But here's what they forget. Patterns always reveal themselves. The truth always has a way of rising. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, people start to connect the dots. They start to notice that this person is always the victim in every story they tell. And when that happens, the act begins to crumble. Let me give you a real example. There was a woman, let's call her Rachel. At her office, there was a co-worker who mastered the role of the victim. Every time she was confronted, she'd twist the story and say things like, "I can't believe you'd accuse me. I'd never hurt anyone." She knew exactly when to cry and who to cry in front of, and it worked for a while. Rachel, who had been direct and honest, suddenly looked like the aggressor. Rachel tried to explain herself. She showed facts, shared proof, and even tried to have calm, logical conversations, but the more she spoke, the worse things got. The co-worker thrived on the drama, using every word Rachel said as evidence of her cruelty. So Rachel made a new choice. She went silent. No more justifying, no more reacting. She did her work, kept her peace, and let time do the talking. And over time, it worked. People began to notice the pattern. The co-worker cried victim one too many times, and others stopped believing it. The same emotional tricks that once earned sympathy now looked suspicious. Eventually, her credibility collapsed under the weight of her own behavior. So, how do you handle someone who plays the victim? First, stop arguing. The more you try to explain, the more fuel you give their narrative. Second, remain calm and emotionally detached. Let their own actions speak for them. And finally, trust in karma. People who manipulate others eventually expose themselves, not because you called them out, but because they can't keep the act going forever. In the last part, we saw how people who manipulate truth and play the victim eventually reveal themselves, not because you expose them, but because time always does. And that brings us to another hard truth. Sometimes silence speaks loudest when you're simply being undervalued. 5. When they ignore your worth. This is one of the most painful yet powerful lessons you'll ever face. It's the slow realization that someone whether it's a friend, a partner, a colleague, no longer sees your value. You've been there. You give, you show up, you support. You're present during their highs and their lows. But in return, you're met with indifference. Your effort is met with silence. Your loyalty is taken for granted. And the natural reaction, you want to fight for their recognition. You want them to see how much you matter, to finally understand what you bring to the table. But here's a brutal truth. Begging for recognition only lowers your value. The more you chase after people's approval, the less they respect you. Why? Because people rarely appreciate what's always available. They don't value what they assume will never leave, and that's where silence becomes your greatest ally. When you stop explaining yourself, stop proving, stop chasing, something subtle but powerful happens. Your absence begins to speak, and often it speaks far louder than your presence ever did. That's when people begin to feel the gap, the void, the quiet loss of something they never thought would go away. Silence holds up a mirror and forces them to finally see what they ignored. This is where Stoic wisdom brings clarity. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." And when you walk away with quiet dignity, that truth slowly emerges, not through angry words, not through emotional pleas, but through absence. Let me share a story. There was a man I know. Let's call him Jake. He was that guy, the one always making the effort. Whether it was friends or co-workers, he was the first to check in, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who offered help without being asked. He showed people they mattered, but over time, he noticed something unsettling. If he didn't reach out, no one did. If he stopped texting, the silence stretched on for days, even weeks. No one checked on him. That's when he realized he wasn't valued. He was simply convenient. So Jake made a quiet decision. No dramatic goodbyes, no emotional confrontations. He just stopped. He stepped back. No chasing, no explaining. And what happened? The people who genuinely cared reached out. They noticed. They reconnected. But the ones who only saw him as an option, they vanished. And that silence was his answer. So, how do you respond when you feel unseen? First, stop explaining your worth. It doesn't shrink just because someone refuses to recognize it. Second, step back and observe. The right people won't need reminders to value you. They already will. And finally, trust time. When you walk away in silence, you give others the rare opportunity to confront what they've taken for granted. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to prove your worth. You just need to stop giving it away to those who can't see it. In the last part, we explored how stepping back from those who undervalue you can be the most powerful way to reclaim your worth. And sometimes that absence, that silence, is the only way they finally learn what they've lost. Now let's turn to another critical Stoic skill, perhaps the most underrated form of inner power, not reacting. Daikons, when they try to provoke you, there will always be people who thrive on chaos. People who push your buttons not by accident, but by design. They make sharp comments, stir up petty drama, or throw subtle jabs in your direction. Why? Because they want one thing: your reaction, the moment you respond. With anger, frustration, or even just visible irritation, you give them what they want. You hand over your peace of mind. They win not because they were right, but because they succeeded in getting under your skin. Here's the hard truth. People who provoke you aren't seeking understanding. They're seeking control. They want you to break character. They want the satisfaction of watching you flustered, defensive, or off balance. Your emotional reaction becomes their fuel. It gives them a sense of dominance. But when you stay calm, grounded, and unshaken, that is the ultimate power move. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your armor. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. You can't control what others say or do, but you can always control what you allow to penetrate your inner peace. And when you master that, you become untouchable. Let me share a story. There's a guy I know, we'll call him Adam. At his office, there was a coworker who loved to stir up conflict. In every meeting, every conversation, this person would drop little verbal barbs, hoping to trigger Adam, to get him to snap, argue, or at least defend himself. At first, Adam took the bait. He'd push back, explain, or try to call it out. Logically, but nothing worked. In fact, it only made the provocations worse. Then one day, Adam made a shift. The next time his coworker threw out a passive-aggressive comment, Adam didn't flinch. He simply smiled, gave a calm nod, and continued on, completely unbothered. And you know what happened? The coworker hated it. He tried again, then again, but without the emotional response he craved. The game stopped being fun. Eventually, he gave up. Adam had taken back his power, well, not by fighting, but by refusing to play. So, how do you deal with people who try to provoke you? First, recognize the pattern. If someone keeps targeting you emotionally, it's not a coincidence. It's a strategy. Second, stay calm and detached. Your silence and self-control will frustrate them more than any comeback ever could. And finally, remember that real strength doesn't come from reacting. It comes from not needing to react at all. Because at the end of the day, the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who refuses to let others decide how they feel, speak, or move. Previously, we talked about the quiet power of refusing to react, how staying calm in the face of provocation denies others the emotional control they crave. Now, let's turn to one of the most transformative lessons of all, when your absence becomes the consequence. 7. When they regret losing you, this may be one of life's most bittersweet truths, that people often don't realize what they had until it's gone. There comes a point when someone who mistreated you, who took your presence for granted, or who failed to appreciate your worth, finally understands what they lost. But by then, it's already too late. Here's the truth that hurts, but also frees you. If someone truly valued you, they never would have risked losing you to begin with. When you're always there, consistent, supportive, dependable, people get used to you. They stop noticing. They assume you'll always be around. But the moment you withdraw, the silence becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, they start to see the reality they ignored. Suddenly, your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. They begin replaying moments in their minds, moments they dismissed, things they should have said, choices they wish they could undo. That regret, it doesn't come because you reminded them. It comes because you stopped reminding them. And that's why silence, again, is your most powerful response. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You don't even need to say, "I told you so." Let them feel the loss. Let them sit with the weight of their own decisions. Let the echo of your absence do what words never could. Because when you walk away, truly walk away, with no drama, no second chances, no lingering hope, everything changes. You stop giving your energy to someone who didn't deserve it. And that's when your silence speaks loudest. This is where Stoic wisdom shines once again. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." True strength isn't found in controlling others, it's found in mastering yourself. It's in having the discipline to walk away from those who failed to value you. It's in the self-respect to resist the urge to chase. And it's in the quiet wisdom of knowing when to stop and never look back. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't beg or explain. Real power knows when it's time to let go. In the last part, we talked about the strength it takes to walk away, and the deep truth that regret often comes too late. But what happens when someone who lost you finally realizes it and tries to return? Let me share a story that captures this moment perfectly. There was a woman I know, we'll call her Olivia. She was in a long-term relationship where she gave everything, her time, her love, her emotional support, all poured into someone who took it for granted. Her partner assumed she'd always be there, that no matter how little he gave back, she would stay. Until one day, she didn't. Olivia didn't shout. She didn't beg. She didn't threaten to leave as a warning. She simply walked away. No drama, no explanations, just silence. At first, her partner thought it was temporary, that she was bluffing. He expected her to come back, like she always did. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. And that's when it hit him. She was really gone. By the time he reached out, full of apologies, promises, and regret, Olivia had already moved on. She had healed, grown, found peace. And that's when he finally felt the full weight of the loss he never saw coming. So how do you handle someone who regrets losing you? First, don't offer them an easy way back. If they only appreciated your worth after your absence, then they never truly valued you in the first place. Second, don't explain yourself. Let your absence be the message. Let the silence be the consequence. And finally, remember this. Real self-respect isn't just walking away. It's staying gone when you know your value, because in the end, the most powerful lesson you can teach someone is this. Once you're gone, you're gone. If someone regrets losing you, let them. Their regret is not your responsibility. Their lesson is not your burden. You gave your energy. You gave your presence. You gave your best. Now give yourself the peace you always deserved. Walk away, stay silent, and let karma and time do the rest, because true strength isn't loud. It doesn't chase, beg, or explain. It simply knows when to leave and never look back. Thank you for watching. May you walk forward with clarity, dignity, and the quiet power of knowing your worth.